All right. Good evening, everyone, and happy Wednesday. It is. What the heck is today? Time's flying so fast. Here we go, June 19, 2013. Hope you had a beautiful day and a wonderful weekend, because we sure have an awesome show in store for you. Always informative here with Sydney Ross Singer. And tonight we're going to talk about, pose the question, does looking good, quote unquote, have to feel bad? Does it have to hurt? Why do we alter our bodies? Cosmetics, plastic surgery, body shaping clothing like bras, our favorite topic here, shaving, tattoo, piercing, etc. Are there any medical implications because of it? And do we as a society reward disease and discourage health? And if so, how? It is so good to have you here tonight, Sydney. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Christie. It's great to be with you. I was looking forward to this, and it's nice to chat with you some more.
Yay, me too. We enjoy you very much, and truly groundbreaking work that you have performed. And I get a lot of letters from women, especially with the bra issue, thanking me for educating them and getting them to go bra free. And they're telling about all the friends and family members that they've been able to influence. And it's like, I didn't do anything. I'm just following Sydney's lead. I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for you. So all that thanks, respect, and gratitude goes to you.
Well, thank you. But it needs people like you and the people who are willing to try these things and challenge these cultural norms. We need people to do that, to make this ever work, to make society change. Or if society isn't going to change, at least we can change.
Exactly.
And avoid these pitfalls.
I sent you an email, I think, last week, asking, well, okay, so first it's the bras, but what about shaving, and what about root canals, and what about all these other things that we just do because have our wisdom teeth pulled and things like that we just do just because we're told to. So the free the boobies, the bra-free issue has really just snowballed in my life. Not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and has caused me to really look at and, just question the beliefs that I've held the last 40 years.
I think that's fantastic, and it is definitely a slippery slope. Once you start recognizing how women and men are manipulated into doing these ridiculous, expensive, and harmful lifestyles, just to be acceptable, and just because it's fashion, and just because it's the way it's done, and people just follow like sheep, and then they're like led to slaughter too. And once you start realizing that, you do open your eyes up a lot. But years ago, I would have been much more extreme about my approach. But if we tell people to stop doing all of these, let's become natural people overnight and get rid of everything, it's going to probably scare people away. And then, it's so I'm trying to, I think you have a really good select audience of people who are very brave and intelligent enough to see the bigger picture and are willing to try these things and question them. And maybe those are the only people we should care about. But I feel like we need to make room for other people to realize they don't have to challenge all of these things at once. Once they try the bra-free and feel so much healthier, then it opens their eyes up, and there's a natural evolution of awareness.
Yeah, totally agree. That's very well said, Sydney. And it does get scary, because when the bra issue came up for me, it was just, I was doing it just for health and figured, well, let's see, because I think you can tell by now, Sydney, I'm kind of one of those, got to try it for myself and see. It doesn't matter how many books I read or how many studies I read. To me, it's just words. So it was the experience itself that sold me.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could talk about some of these other things that people do to alter their bodies and why. Yeah. And maybe, let's just take something benign.
Yeah.
Should you color your hair? because I mean, I'm sure people know that there's bad dyes and toxic chemicals that they use in a lot of hair dyes, but there are also more natural ones, like what is that one? The brown. What's that natural hair color that people use all the time? Henna. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. But there's the bigger question of, should you care? And besides the actual physical impact of the dye on your hair, what does it mean that you care so much to color your hair? Is that good or bad? I mean, of course, everyone's going to have their own answers to this. I'm asking rhetorical questions.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because as soon as you start worrying about your hair color and you're looking old, I mean, that's really the issues that are coming up. These are fears of aging and dying and being devalued for getting older. And, not the worshiping of youth and, that whole cultural trap. Because obviously, the fountain of youth is not a new thing that people are looking for, and people have wanted this forever. So when you have this promise of a youthful look by various methods, one of which is hair coloring, are you buying into an entire, should you be more accepting of your aging?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of that? Do you color your hair? What do you think of people?
I mean, as everything, it boils down to personal choice.
Sure.
But I don't. I used to when I was young and really didn't need to, as far as, covering up grays, which I guess is the reason that most women or even men color their hair as well. I personally am extremely proud of my 35 wisdom hairs. I've always kind of thought of it as a sign of maturity and wisdom, and that's not to say that just because you have gray hair, you're all of a sudden mature and wise. And it also doesn't mean that you're not mature and wise if you don't have any. But I'm at a place in my life where I just don't feel that I need to spend hours a day trying to make myself look as close to a Playboy centerfold as possible. But let me ask you, because I know many of these fears stem from, as you addressed, of course, aging and being insignificant, but also fear of not being accepted by the opposite sex or, being attractive by our love interest. So what about you? I mean, do you think there's any rules as far as women and their hair goes? Should we dye our hair? Should we cut it off at a certain age?
Well, all the rules are relative to the culture. I mean, this is not like a written in stone, this is the answer, yes. At 35, you should cut your hair and then color it from there.
Yeah.
No, it's not like that. And I think it's really interesting to think of the myths that we grow up with and how they change over time. Because, years ago, you were talking about how wise people could be considered old elders, wise elders with gray hair. That's from a different time in history. I don't think old people are valued in our culture today. I mean, we're a real throwaway culture. There was a time when you appreciated tradition and history and experience of your elders, and you respected them. And then, of course, if you respect elders, then white hair would become much more acceptable, and other things that elder people would experience. That would suddenly be much more acceptable. But I think the goal in our society is really today more than ever is really just to make money. And you make more money if people are uncomfortable with themselves.
Yes.
Then they have to always buy products. They got to buy something.
Yeah.
So it's always about undermining people's self-confidence and self-esteem and sense and body image. And it starts off with little girls with their Barbie dolls and with the images on TV and in the movies and on the billboards and in the magazines and what they see in the stores and what their mother's wearing and their classmates and it becomes the culture imprints on the generation what is acceptable and the next generation may change, and that's why we often feel like our parents and grandparents they're coming from a different time, and they are. And it isn't necessarily as relevant today because things are changing so fast. But look at how it's changed. I don't know, because you're near my age, Christie. You're in your 5th decade, I've read, right?
Well, yeah, so I'm 41. So the
you're 41.
Beginning of my 5th decade.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm in my 50s, and I was raised in the 60s and 70s, and you know, I would never have ever thought that middle class white girls would be tattooing and piercing themselves without their parents committing suicide. You know, I mean, it's like who would have ever thought? From that perspective of the 60s and 70s, where long hair was it, you know, hippie stuff. But then it became body piercing, tongue piercing, pretty extreme stuff, you know, I mean, extreme to look at and from that mindset of someone from another generation. Mm-hmm. Now it's considered acceptable. Mm-hmm. Tattoos are everywhere. Piercings are everywhere. I mean, it's the times change so fast. And that, to me, is testimony to how effectively people are controlled by our society. You know, if anybody wanted to do an experiment like how much can we control people, then they could have said, okay, well, let's make them all, you know, do this. We'll make it acceptable for an extreme thing today to be completely common and acceptable in 20 to 30 years. And they've done it in lots of things. Yeah. So it's that's just so there's no answer to what is right and what is wrong. It completely depends on what period in history you've been imprinted.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know, men have to deal with hair issues too. I'm going bald. I feel like and my wife laughs at me because this is my vanity thing. Mm-hmm. Because of going, I realize. I did an experiment, you know, I let my hair do different things. Sometimes, and my face, my beard. With man, the beard is very expressive stuff. Like if you just have, I live in Hawaii, on the east side of the island, near a town called Pahoa, on the Hilo side of the Big Island. And it's sort of it's a very mixed community, but there's a lot of hippies in this area too, a lot of alternative people. And, I tried an experiment. Hilo is much more conservative. There's a lot of military here too, so it's a very big mix of contradictory type groups. If I wear a mustache, my face is going to be pretty white-haired now. My hair is very white, even though I'm just in my 50s. If I wear a mustache, I look military, and the people in Hilo smile at me much more. And it's just people that I see, strangers.
Wow.
But the hippies can't deal with the mustache. They just can't.
So beards are okay, but mustache a no-go.
Right. If you have a beard, the hippies love you, but then they look strange at you in the more conservative areas. So and then I shaved my head. Okay, I had to try an experiment because I woke up one morning and I looked at my head, and from the eyes up, I saw my dad and as an old man. And it just freaked me out. And I thought, boy, does this look terrible. And I have that chicken hair look on the top of the head. You know when you pluck a chicken and it has these few hairs sticking around? Well, that's sort of what the top of my head looks like.
Aww.
So, now, I have hair around the rest of my head, but it's that top that isn't really there, but it's not really gone. And it's not the kind of thing you want to grow long and comb over because I don't have enough for even doing that much. So what I decided one day was I'm going to shave my head. And I did. And the locals here loved me. All of a sudden, I was like very popular with another group, the local group, which is like a combination of Hawaiian, Filipino, Japanese, all of that kind of stuff that normally doesn't like white people, okay, because Hawaii's kind of prejudiced. And normally, these people wouldn't even look at me. Suddenly, I shaved my head, which is very popular in that subculture, and I was cool. It was amazing. But then, the hippies thought I was like a really too straight for them. So it was, you can't win all of the groups at one time.
Yeah.
But so men deal with this too. I tell my wife about this. I say, what do you prefer? Do you want me to shave? Do you want me to keep? Well, she's very practical, and and I am too. I noticed that when I shaved my head, I was much cooler, much cooler.
Cooler is in hip and accepted, or
no,
cooler is in temperature? Okay.
Temperature. In fact, it makes me realize, I bet you, I don't know if this is a fact, but I would guess, and it would be hard to even prove this, in the past when people wore hats a lot, in the 30s, 40s, before that, and they wore wigs, there must have been so much heat stroke and overheating of people because, it's a major evaporator is on your head. That's where most, was it 40 or 60% of your heat comes out of your head. And if you have a head of hair, I've discovered that when I let it grow back slowly and then I'd shave it off again and I would play with it. And if I would just get a sheen of hair on my head that it feels like just fuzz, it would be much warmer than purely shaved. And the problem with purely shaved was it would stick to things like the pillowcase, and, it would be kind of uncomfortable and then when it started getting like that 5 o'clock shadow growth, it would be like sandpaper and everything would stick to my head like I was Velcro. So that was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
But I do realize, though, thermally, it makes an extreme difference between being sometimes overheated. I mean, I live in the tropics, so it's pretty warm all the time. But the evenings is like the mid-60s, the days is the mid-80s. And I could feel a tremendous difference with those temperatures without hair. It gets, you feel like it's 10 degrees cooler. So anyway, that was my personal, and that's what I think people should just try. Try to see what feels comfortable, because that's what my wife says. I mean, she doesn't care, which really, sometimes it aggravates me, I say, you have to care. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, how can I want to look good for her.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure I sound just like a woman now,
No, you sound just like me and my partner. So I'm not laughing at you.
Surprised.
We are laughing with you.
So I'm telling you, you gotta care, but we don't care even about the clothes that we're wearing. I mean, we're not fashion people. We look completely for comfort and what's practical and what makes you, if you feel comfortable and you're going to be most likely healthier with that. And discomfort is a sign, a clue that you're not doing the right thing. So you got to just go through and ask what's comfortable. And I've had to get comfortable with going bald. So what I do now is I use an electric razor type of thing, but not like a face razor, a hair cutter, an electric hair cutter. But I put so I give myself about 1/8 of an inch hair. And this way I feel it's white, but it doesn't look like old man white. I mean, I literally lose 15 years by cutting my hair from when it's white to like shaving my head. I look 15 years younger. But it also brings about other problems. Like I say, it feels kind of exposed too much, and it gets really irritated as it's growing back. You got to shave it a lot, and you just get into starting to wonder, gee, why do I care so much to do this all the time? And that's what it comes back to. It's like, why do we care?
Yeah.
What is this all about?
Yeah, why do we care?
It is a really good question.
Our partners don't care. Your wife doesn't care. I totally believe she's being sincere. And I don't know, this whole segment when you've been talking, Sydney, I've been singing Billy Joel in my mind. I want you just the way you are. It's
well,
true.
That's true.
We don't care.
Well, imagine, though, if your spouse said that to you. Imagine if my wife did say, honey, I don't like you. I don't like the way you look that way. I think you're sexier this way. I like men who are like this. First of all, that would probably bug me because I don't want her to like men. I want her to like me, right? So it's not a generic thing. And she's like that. She wouldn't say that. I mean, she's not like, I like men like this. But, if she was saying, I don't approve of you this way. I only like you that way. Maybe she said, maybe it was, I like you with hair. I really don't like you bald. At which point I would feel really bad that I was losing my hair. In which case I would probably, if I was the average man, this isn't me, but
Go get implants.
I would look into implants or taking these drugs that are supposed to grow hair on you, or doing electrical stimulation, or who the hell knows what, you'll do. There'll be somebody selling a new thing. And that's the thing. After they don't work, then there's the next guy out there who's going to say, well, I got something that'll work. And as long as I'm still feeling insecure, I'm going to go for it because, maybe this will help. So it really is about insecurity. And all of this is about insecurity. And
all of it.
The best way in our society to become invisible is to be white-haired and old-looking.
Aww.
It's true. It's true. I really feel sorry for people who are old since I've become into that group. It's that when you're standing around, like I'm with my son who's in his 20s, and we're talking to other people. If I'm white-haired, then they won't even give me eye contact. I mean, you're like standing there. You could be the dog.
Oh, really?
If you, And then when I cut my hair or shave my head, I suddenly get much more eye contact and like recognition. So it's like it's as though in our culture, just as women worry about being devalued for their looks, when you're a man, you're also devalued for getting old. You get to the point where you're like out of the game. There's a point where you're in the game, you look like you're still in the game, but then you go over some edge where you look like, people like in their 70s maybe are starting to get into that, where they're no longer thought of as wise older people, but more like decaying, senile getting type people. And I think that's the cultural, the myth of what aging is all about. And you start to devalue people over a certain age. They're not there. So I was noticing how appearance is so important. And that's why women will say, well, Sid, I'm glad you finally got it. Now you know why I wear a bra. Because the image is everything. If I don't wear a bra and I look like I have droopy breasts compared to the images I'm supposed to look like, that will devalue me as a woman, as a person. People won't even want to look at me as much. The woman next to me who has perky breasts is going to get the looks and the attention and the energy, and I'm going to be like yesterday's toast. It's like, who cares? So I could see that argument. It happens as well. You do get devalued for certain things. Once you're retired and look like you're retired, you're out of it. You don't seem to be, people don't care about you anymore. So you try to look younger, and that's what everybody is trying. But then we have to ask, okay, you've got to step back from the game and ask yourself why you care. Is it really important? Are people really thinking what you think they're thinking, or is it you being your own worst critic, which is probably the case a lot of the time?
Yeah.
And what do you have to do to conform? If you wanted to conform, what would that do to you? And then if it's something like that takes, I'll get, maybe if I get my ear pierced, or maybe if I get my nose pierced, I'll suddenly be a cool old guy, What does it take to be acceptable? Should I color the gray hair? Should I wear a wig? Should I maybe get a tattoo? Should I, what else? The clothing I wear should certainly be young clothing, right? You'd have to go to the young shops.
Or you just put on a Rolex. No. Terrible joke. I totally don't mean that at all. You're bringing up really valid issues, I think, that we all ask. And I'm really sorry that, maybe I'm personally not responsible for all of this, but as part of the culture, I would like to apologize for being part of a culture that demonizes or demeans or trivializes the wisdom of age. But as for me, even when I was young, like all my friends were like 20 years older. I was always the one that would go straight to the oldest person to see what I could learn. Ooh, I bet they have cool stories. But I do realize that, I've definitely seen it where people are like, well, that's just some old lady or that's some old guy. He doesn't know anything. And it's like, wait, he didn't get there by being born yesterday. He or she might know something. So it's just a shame that we treat people that way.
And what adds to the shame is when we conform to that and then affect ourselves and become our own abusers.
Yeah,
it's like
because we're going to be that way too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we internalize that message that other people are giving us, that of disapproval. And once you've internalized that, how far are you willing to go? I mean, some women and men will resort to plastic surgery to change their appearance. Now, I mean, that's big. That's as soon as you go under the knife, you run the risk of death by anesthesia. That's the biggest risk of surgery is anesthesia and post-operative infections. And being in a hospital today with all the gnarly bugs that are growing in hospitals, you don't even want to go in there if you don't have to. So just going in, elective surgery is like something people should really think about. And of course, it's being sold like crazy. So, and the image that it brings. But that's a big thing, and it's expensive. So imagine how browbeaten a person has to be to cut themselves or have a doctor do it to them and stuff things in different parts of their body. A woman might, decide, I am just not acceptable with my breast this shape. Mm-hmm. I'll either, and this is one of the things I'm worried about is women are going to stop wearing bras and they'll just get implants instead. Because they'll figure, this is safer. I just might as well. And after all, you might as well get your breast tissue removed and have a mastectomy at the same time. And join Angelina Jolie. This way you can figure, okay, I've lowered my, who knows but as soon as you start talking about surgery, you really need to realize you're talking extremism and a commitment to keeping that going. Once you get implants, you put an artificial substance in the body, it's going to shift and move and leak and change shape, and your body's going to try to reject it. There's going to be all sorts of things that go on. And over time, you're going to have a doctor go back in and cut it out. I mean, I don't know to what degree they let women realize that they're going to have to get their breast implants, touched up now and then, like every 5 to 10 years. And it's a commitment to surgery.
And they break apart and, obvious, I'm sure, if they, break the whatever solution they're using nowadays, whether it's saline or something else, can't be good, floating around in your bloodstream.
Plus you have an internal compression, something that's going to cause pressure in the body that's going to cut down on lymphatic drainage too. You don't want to have this artificial thing stuck inside your skin. And, but that's what people will opt because of lack of self-love and because they're so browbeaten into feeling they need to change the way they look. They'll take Botox injections. They'll subject themselves to drugs. Like what if a man, men do this too. I mean, they'll get penis implants. They'll actually have like a permanent erection. Will get implants in their penis. They'll get buttocks implants, leg, calf implants. I mean, men are just as stupid as women. It's not like this is a woman-only thing. We're all taken in by this constant messages of non-acceptance if you don't conform to these things. But when it gets into let's take, what are these expectations that we have to be? That's what we really have to ask. Are these reasonable? Are we always in our teens and 20? I mean, what is the ideal age, you think, of the culture? 18? 16? I mean, what seems to be the age that is held in most esteem? What would you think, Christie?
Gosh.
When you look at the images, look at the TV, who the heroes are, the age
according
of
to the images, then it would obviously be like early 20s or late teens maybe.
I think for a girl, it's younger for a girl than for a guy. Probably a guy would be like in his late 20s and a girl would be in her teens. Yeah. I mean, I think they like the women even younger and more immature. It's part of the image.
Yeah, because we can't say no. we don't love ourselves enough yet. But man, just thinking about these things, penis implants, breast implants, all of these issues, I thought I hated myself. I'm just really, kind of in shock and just feel really sad for people that hate themselves that much to go so far to mutilate their bodies. I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen like the plastic surgery gone bad. That, like Catwoman, or there's many.
Well, she's deliberate. She was deliberate. She wasn't gone bad. She wanted to look that way.
Wow.
Catwoman.
Imagine just looking at her photos, how much she had to hate herself to go through those dozens and dozens of surgery. And I'm sorry, Catwoman, I love you. I'm sure you're a beautiful person, but you do not look better. You look actually really freaking scary.
That's really the question. Why do people do all this weird stuff? I mean, clearly, there is no one answer of an objective answer for aesthetics. What we think looks good, you can't prove. It just sort of accept. It's like it's a given. It looks good. You're taught it, and it starts to become your frame of reference, like your assumption. You don't really question why does that look good. It just we just accept that. And the things that we do to alter our bodies to look good, and all of these practices that can have problems. Why do we do these weird things? And I think it's because we like to just create attention to separate something from the rest of our bodies. Like if we suddenly bring attention to our eyes with makeup around the eyes and draw out the eyes. Now, that doesn't have to be sexy. It could be if you interpret it as such and you let people think it's sexy, especially if you make sexual gestures while coloring your eyes. And that would suddenly, if people got into it and other people started going, suddenly like the 100th monkey, everybody's coloring their eyes. And it's considered a sexual thing because it was interpreted that way in the beginning. It was presented that way, I should say.
Wow.
And I think it's like a fetish is created. We just, whatever it is, we could do foot binding. Look at the Chinese, what they did. And we still do. We do a form of foot binding in our culture, but the Chinese were really extreme. They made these shoes for women to hobble, and most of the time it was for, because they didn't want their women to go out and fool around or whatever. They didn't trust them, so they kept them at home disabled in these shoes. And it was like a sign of wealth that you can afford the servants to take care of you in your shoes. And they were tiny. And the toes would fold over on the bottom of the feet and actually rot away. Many of the toes would rot away.
Wow.
And men would clean the toes, the feet of their women. They'd unwrap them and clean them. And they'd get off on the smell being kind of fetid and whatever bound rotting feet smell like. And that was considered really erotic for almost 1,000 years. And today, look what we do to women with shoes. I mean, we put them in stilettos and pointy tips and totally an unnatural shape for a foot, which causes back problems and leg problems and, whole spinal issues, as well as bunions and hammer toes and foot fungus and deformities. We cause lots of disease of the feet because of foot binding today, still.
Yeah. Didn't you say on a previous show that most cancers are actually found in the foot?
Skin cancer.
Skin cancer, okay.
Yeah, a very high site for skin cancer is on the bottom of the foot. And,
okay.
And it makes sense that's, the shoes are really toxic. And the feet are often constricted too, so the skin doesn't get to flush very well. Especially if you have a sock on, the sock is constricting the ankle so that everything below the sock, the lymphatics are going to get congested because they have to come up past the pressure gradient of where the elastic of the top of the sock is. So the feet get puffy or the skin gets puffy. The lymphatics don't flush out these toxins as your foot marinates in the shoe, which has all sorts of really bad chemicals in it, from leather softeners and tanners and things like that and colorants to adhesives, the glues that they hold it all together with. If you smell a new shoe, you could smell all those toxins and you're just soaking your feet in that. So yeah, that's an interesting revelation of what shoes can do to you. Nothing is intrinsically sexy. It's just how you present it and how you are trained to think about it.
So if somebody before you says playing the piano is sexy, you're pretty much programmed with, ooh, well, I better play the piano because it's sexy, or whatever it is, wearing pink shorts, or, growing hyssop, or whatever. Just because somebody says it, then we kind of take that on. We own that belief that somebody put there before us, so then we just equate eyeball licking, playing the piano, growing hyssop with being sexy. That's like magic, really, when you think about it.
It's operant conditioning. This is how you condition any animal. You give them associations.
We could do the same. Being natural is sexy. Being healthy is sexy.
But you got to be. Well, that's the
sexy.
Thing. But listen to what you're saying, because that's interesting. And when you're natural, you're not really being anything. You're just being natural. It's when you change something, and that's why the culture does it. The whole aesthetics purpose is to change what's natural and make it artificial. Artificial meaning man-made, man-affected. Yeah. So we humans do something weird to our bodies, like suddenly constrict a part. Like maybe we like some African tribes do, put a band around our biceps and constrict the arm way up high with this big metal band that's really tight. Yeah. Of course, your arm probably is going to swell, and they probably like that, and it's part of the whole thing. But I'm sure they get problems from it over time. But if you do that, and that's your sign of, that suddenly sets it off, and you look at an arm and say to somebody, wow, your arm is pretty nicely swollen there. That's really attractive. Especially if the guy is like, look at me, I'm attractive. And he might be the leader. He might be the chief, somebody you look up to. They do this. They model it. We humans are copiers. We're definitely a monkey see, monkey do type organism. So we imitate what we see. And if the person doing it is supposed to be sexy, let's say, because, it's obvious what they're supposed to be. They're like body language, and on a very visceral animal level, they're presenting themselves as sexual. But then, so, you don't make that mistake. You see, like if they posed a certain way, inviting sexual contact, then you would know this person is trying to be sexy on a very animalistic level. And then, if it just so happens they do this while painting their bodies pink, you would think, or let's say painting them orange, or maybe not just their whole bodies. Maybe they just paint part of their bodies orange.
Plaid.
And then okay, and then they do it and then they pose like that, and you are now going to relate that thing that they're doing, which should be weird enough to stick in your head, and you equate that with what they're trying to obviously presenting to you. So a polka dotted butt means I'm hot, and sexy. And then that becomes a cultural thing, and everybody starts polka dotting their butts, and it's just the way it is. And people argue, and wives will say to their husbands, "Is my butt polka dotted enough for you, honey?" And
you probably like that question better than, "Honey, does my butt look big?" No, it doesn't look big. It is big.
But big butts could be cool too. You just have to have enough people posing with big butts in sexual, cool ways, and you'll associate it that way. It could be anything. I mean, breasts used to be big, then little, and in the flapper eras, they squished them down to look flat, and they didn't even want to show a bust line. And then there was the Howard Hughes bullet breasts, like his airplanes, and what makes one better than the other? It's just nothing makes it better than the other except the people who agree to it. It's like an unwritten thing, but it's the nature of the human beast that we are social creatures that follow the leader. We have a hierarchy, we have a pecking order, and people want to fit into that pecking order in the right place above others and below others, and they look at the ones above to copy so that they could rise up. And the whole thing is like on a very basic animalistic level. That's what we're doing. And these become the games you play to do it. And the game can change. The game isn't the nature of the game. It's what we're playing, which is human interpersonal dynamics is what we're playing, and the details of it change with history and culture. And If the game, though, happens to be really dangerous and it's bad for us, then you have to step outside of the game and say, wait a minute, let's play our little human pecking order thing and conformity and need to be part of a crowd and all the thing that we humans like to do. Let's do it, though, about stuff that doesn't make us sick, at least. But then it becomes like, whoever gets sick, though, that shows how much of a devotee you are. So if you are, like, anorexic, to some women, like, that's the ultimate.
Yes.
Not only...
Even some men. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like they go to the extreme because we're like that too as creatures. People tend to, go to extremes, black and white. They don't see nuance. They're not comfortable with ambiguity. So they go to extremes. So if being thin is good, then I'm going to be so thin that you're not even, I'm going to be skeletal and you're going to think I'm great. And if they make models skeletal, then kids will want to look that way. I mean, it's just as simple as that. If we had fat models, then kids will want to be fat. Yeah. We need to have bra-free models, but like you said, we need natural people. But the thing is, the reason that doesn't work is, one, it doesn't sell anything. And everything has to sell something in this culture, unfortunately, for it to be promoted at all. I mean, you'll have your moment of saying it, but if it's not selling, there's no sustainability. There's no holding power to something if there's no sales. I want to take a moment, interesting digression on that to show that point with bras and breast cancer. Because when I just tell women to loosen up, I mean, there's no sales involved. You don't have to buy my book to know that now. If you want to see the story and know how we figured it out and our study and all that, it's in our book, Dress to Kill. But you don't need that to know that if you loosen up, you should feel better and you'll be preventing breast cancer. Yes. Fine. But then there have been people that have wanted to help, but they had to sell something because they wanted to do it in a business way. So they wanted to come up with like, well, what about a breast cream? We could smear cream on, if women had to do breast cream every day, then they'd have to rebuy the cream.
Yeah. Because
otherwise, how are we going to keep on being out here without repeated sales? So they love things that you can consume, foods, creams, pills, anything that's consumables. You have to come back for more. Drinks, smokes, all those things are consumables. But if you can buy it once and you don't have to come back, or if you don't even have to buy anything, it doesn't get the support or the staying power in this culture that's based only on sales. Especially look at the internet. What drives the internet? Advertising. It's all about sales. So we live in a culture where everything is bought and sold, everything is put on the market, so that they don't want you to feel like you can do anything from nature just between you and nature. If there is an intervening middleman to make some money on that, it'll be promoted. Otherwise, no one wants to promote you just living naturally.
Yeah, makes so much sense. When I was looking into the shaving thing recently, I started asking, well, gosh, I mean, why are we doing this? Does anyone really know? I'm thinking that perhaps God, Mother Nature, whoever's in charge of this and creating our bodies might have put it there for a reason. And, in my research, it was really interesting how they did it. They started promoting it 5 years before they actually provided the solution, which of course is razors. They started in Harper's Bazaar, I think it was somewhere between 1915 and 1917. They just had an unshaven woman with her arm, just one arm up, for the very first time, and then started introducing the word armpit, which was like a bad word at the time, and they started referring to it as objectionable and unsightly, and so they basically made women hate themselves for 5 years before they, even provided or sold them the solution, and it stuck with us here a century later, and nobody even knows why. We just do it, men and women alike. It's not just women, men too. Men, have a hard time getting jobs in certain arenas if they're not clean shaven or their hair cut or whatever. Like, who started this? Who decides what we all need to do? Who decides what is better?
Well, I'll tell you, I think there's probably an answer to that. Because I mean, there is the power people who are making the fashions are the ones who are deciding.
Yeah.
And that, they don't have to like people. They don't have to have any interest except in them. They could be laughing themselves all the way to the bank.
Oh, I bet they are. I mean, think about it. Look at women's fashion magazines alone. Who owns them? Sorry, but, a bunch of older gay guys? And nothing wrong with being older, nothing wrong with being gay. It is to be a beautiful woman. I don't know. It is that time, though. Unfortunately, we got to take a short break. My, oh my, this is moving quickly. But hang on, we will be right back. Sydney Ross Singer here on SoulJourneysRadio.com. Woo, we've been talking about quite a bit here. All these things we do in the name of beauty. Pretty much, who decides what's beautiful? And I sent you that article about the shaving thing, how they started implementing the propaganda machine, making women feel ugly for having hair, and didn't even provide the solution until 1922. Oh my gosh, can you imagine that? Ah.
Yes, and then the shaving of legs. I wonder if that went with nylons when they came up with nylon stockings.
Yeah. Well, according to this article, I mean, we weren't there, but according to the article, it happened shortly thereafter. They started with the armpits, and then in the 20s and 30s is when they started promoting shaving the legs and, shorter dresses and nylons, and here we go. You sell us products for the rest of our lives. Crazy.
Exactly. Well, now the big thing is pubic shaving, which is I'm sure of all the shavings, that's probably one of the riskier ones, I would think, because of whenever you shave, you're causing some abrasion and micro abrasions on your skin, and it's little openings in the surface of the skin that, and normally, your skin is the first protective layer. Actually, the hair is probably the first protective layer, and then the skin. And when you start cutting into the skin, now everything you put on you can get infections, and the things you do put on your skin gets through the skin more easily. It's not like it's an impermeable barrier anymore. And when you do that in areas where you're sweating, when there's a lot of bacteria, like under the armpits and in the groin, you're dealing with, you're asking for infections. And then if you have any sexual contact, and you have open wounds, and it's more, if your partner has some STDs or anything like that, it's much easier to be transmitted.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
I mean, you just don't want to.
I did try that once, Sydney. This was back in my fashion days where I was a programmed, perfect little, do what you're told girl. And again, who controls the fashion magazines? We already established that. So it kind of made sense to me. But yeah, I tried shaving, I don't know, maybe like 20 years ago. And it didn't feel good. And I thought it looked really disgusting. In fact, I was actually mad at my fiance at the time because, I'm like, how dare you? I felt like he was a pervert because I looked like a 12-year-old girl, which, I don't know, that's kind of the stick figures that we end up seeing in the fashion magazines anyways. So I don't know if that's connected or not, but I know many people, and some people I know, they're all for it. It feels good to them. They like it. But, I mean, come on, Sydney. You know how fast your hair grows back when you shave. And that's something that you're going to have to do, like, every day, all day, and then you get, your butt cheeks rubbing up against each other and, poking it with, mini little razor blades everywhere. To me, it didn't feel good, didn't look good, and I have not done it since. I mean, maybe, okay, a little trim here and there before you put on a swimsuit or something. I can understand that, but yeah, completely shaving it all. I resort back to Mother Nature and the purpose of the hair on our skin exactly where it's supposed to be.
Well, I agree. And the thing is, it really is an interesting nature versus man-made, artificial type of a conflict here, isn't it? It's like and I think it would probably, I think it goes even more than what we're just talking about with fashion. The lifestyle that you embrace also, and I embrace actually, of living close with nature, of letting nature do the healing and try to just assist nature rather than as soon as you're sick you go to the doctor and ask the doctor to fix it up for
give
you.
me a pill.
Right. And to, like, you have a baby, in order to have his immune system working right, according to this world today, you got to give him vaccines, and like it's essential. I'm sure you're not into that. It's like, it's an interesting, I've noticed that, and you'd be also anti-GMO. It's like you could be profiled.
There's something wrong with us.
Well, the nature people, we nature people are, what ends up happening is it's like nature versus man. And I think part of this whole thing is that man is we have something wrong. We don't like what people do. We don't like what they do to each other, what they do to the environment and to animals and to themselves. We see what people do and we sort of see the destructive negative side. And in a way, the nature movement is a little bit misanthropic. It's a little bit against man itself. Like there's something wrong with being a human. And then the other people on the other side of that are completely artificial. They have no problem with GMOs or eating conventionally grown, sprayed crops. They have no problem participating completely with the system. They look the part, they dress the part, they'll shave and wear colognes and deodorants and all sorts of preservatives and whatever they need, and they'll be in that world that's completely man-made, and they'll probably enjoy living in the cities, and the nature people probably enjoy living in the country.
Yeah,
and it's like there's different cultures here, and I was perceiving that with the Free the Boobies. I was saying to myself, what's going to happen is I didn't want this to be the case. It's like the only women who are going to go bra free are going to be the back to nature people.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way. If we're going to be changing this disease, we got to get it to all these other people. But the problem is they're all like so plugged in that getting rid of one thing, like you were realizing on this site, on your Free the Boobies Facebook page, which I recommend people go to and participate in, what they realized is when you talk about getting rid of the bra, then the idea of what do you do with your armpits comes up. Mm-hmm. The idea of, so you shave or you don't shave? Do you smear deodorant or antiperspirant? Do you, so it's not just that, right? It's not just the bra. It's these other things. Do we wear cosmetics? Do we color our hair? I mean, it's a slippery slope. At what point do we stop changing our bodies? What do we allow to change? What don't we change? Are we not allowed to change anything? Must it be that all people must be 100% natural with no modern interventions, that mankind has never come up with anything of value? And I want to say something in the name of moderation, because man isn't so bad, because that's a form of self-hate. Yes. When we become misanthropic, we are people. We start to hate ourselves. And all the environmentalists I've run into, I know I'm sounding preachy right now, but this is a deep thing that I've seen as a problem in people's attitudes and the way they deal with these things. You look at environmentalists, and they hate people because people are destroying the world the way they see it. People are the source of the problem. Yeah. And what they want to do is remove people from the environment as much as possible and get these little preserves that are locked off from everybody, and they go, so it's like keep people out. People are what's bad. If we really believe that as a philosophy, then we have to have some degree of self-hate and lack of acceptance. Yeah. And there are some good things that people have done that nature wouldn't necessarily be better. Like in nature, I mean, I live in the jungle. It's much more wild. I have most of my housing is open air, so I feel the clouds coming. I can feel the cool of a cloud as it approaches.
Oh.
The birds come flying through the house. We live like outdoors.
Beautiful.
It feels like you're outdoors. And it's so back to nature and connected with the animals. But we also have like termites and insects everywhere, and there are rats, and there are all sorts of realities of living close with nature. I like the fact that we have a solar system, which is a man-made innovation. I like the fact that we have clean water and the technology for clean water, because sanitation is one of the most important lifestyle issues for disease. In fact, 100 years ago, when the biggest breakthroughs were made from the 17 and 1800s, where people they had no, their sewage was going into their water wells. I mean, they were poisoning. So when they had like smallpox or whatever, it would go rampant because everyone was spreading it. They didn't know about bacteria and about keeping clean. Of course, now we overkill against bacteria. We've gone the other extreme. There has to be a median here is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah. And I feel like there are some things we can do to our bodies without feeling terribly guilty about it, if it makes us feel good and doesn't hurt us. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a conforming person and feel like you're part of the group if at the same time you're doing it with free will, with full awareness, like your family is your group. A family is a group to which we like to conform. And we want to look good for the family that we live in, and we do things to please our family. And we believe in our family's opinions and judgments of us, and they by our judgments. So we're sort of in this that's a good model. In your family, you do want to please and conform, and there's nothing really wrong with that. It's just that if you have to do it in a way that's self-abusive, that it's like joining a club that requires a hazing practice that can really hurt you. You don't want to be part of that club. But it doesn't mean you don't want to be in a club. Some people really need that. Some people more than others. I think there are different types of people. I don't think we're all the same. I think some people need to be led more. Some people like to be loners. Some people enjoy groups much more. Their friends are extremely important to them. Some people don't care about their friends. They just do their own thing. And some people are leaders and some are followers. So everybody is different. And I think I don't want to criticize people for feeling that they need to conform, especially in the real world where if you don't look a certain way, you're not going to get a job. If you have your hair a certain way, people will have a prejudice against you.
Yes.
If you are, there is a reality here. If you dress with the wrong kind of clothes in the wrong social environment, people will get really pissed off at you, and they'll think of you as a bum or as a whatever. You don't belong, you're other, and they will reject you. So it's, being part of a group is extremely important in many ways. But we just have to take more control over it. It's like, who's in charge of the group? And we need to realize that we constitute the group. Yes. So therefore, it is us. We can take control of the group by redefining, relooking, and talking and communicating and sharing how we feel. And then, just like with your family. And you could say, this is hurting me. And then your family would say, we don't want this to hurt you. Don't do it if it hurts. And that's how people should feel about each other. Don't do it if it hurts. It's okay to please your spouse, but don't do it if it hurts.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a simple message that everybody can join in on. So it doesn't have to be bra free. You got to also not have any makeup. You can't shave your armpits or your legs. You can't wear deodorant. You got to be a hippie. If you say that to people, they will reject it, except for hippies who are already doing it. So in my goal as a medical anthropologist, I'm trying to transform culture by enlightening people to turn the light on and hoping they have enough intelligence to see once the light is turned on and to be honest with what they're seeing and not go into denial, and then try to change it for the better. Of course, we've been so conditioned to be disempowered and to feel like we can't do anything about it that people are just so worried about keeping up with what the expectations are, that they do not have the personal power to challenge it. And I think those people, though, we can still save from disease if we can show them the way and demonstrate that these other lifestyles are very acceptable, very happy ways to live. It's very helpful, and it's self-rewarding. It's really, once you start doing these things, it's self-rewarding.
It really is. We have a caller on the line, area code 909. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Christie.
Lisa, how are you?
Yes. Hi, very good. I have never called into a radio show before, so you are my virginal radio talk show host.
Yay. Well, I'll be gentle.
But I did want to mention, though, in the last segment you guys talked a lot about, consumerism and wanting to fit into groups and things like that. And what I was thinking about when you were talking about that was an exchange that my husband and I had just before he went to work tonight. He's had a goatee, on his face because his work doesn't allow him to not shave. He has to shave. And he had shaved it all off, his goatee, and he had noticed all these ingrown hairs and things like that. And I said, well, why do you bother shaving? And it's because he has to do it. He has to fit in at work. And it kind of reminded me of when I first met his family. I've never shaved my pubic hair, in my entire life. And we went swimming with his family on a boat. And when we got home, he said to me, he goes, well, why didn't you shave before you met my family?
Oh, my gosh.
And I said to him, why would I do that? You've never mentioned that to me. I don't see why I should. And he goes, well, it was just kind of embarrassing.
Are they going to inspect your cooch or something? Here, nice to meet you. Can you lift up your bikini?
I can imagine them saying, yeah, she was a really nice girl, son, but her pubic hairs were showing. How could she do that?
And he did. And his family, of course, they would never say anything. They're, very polite people like that. But, for him to say to me that he was embarrassed by me not shaving, I thought that it was a very weird thing. Because I'd never paid attention to people's pubic hair and their bikini line. And they're looking down there, then maybe there's something wrong with them.
Wow.
We talk about a society where we have privacy issues anymore. Your pubic hairs are public issues now. I
remember back in the day, again, my Matrix Hollywood days, they would say, well, because I'm like, what, you have to do this every day? And, I would ask the question, well, who's going to see it anyways? And what if something happens? What if you're in an accident and, the ambulance comes and they have to take your clothes off and you're not clean shaven? And it's like, really? Oh my gosh, we have to worry about who might see it in the event of a tragic accident? Oh my gosh.
And what are you wanting? Are you wanting to be attractive to these guys while you're unconscious in their the back of their ambulance?
So. Oh, wow, Lisa, so how did that pan out? You're still married, so you must have won.
Well, we are married now, and I did, the next day we had gone out on the boat again, and so I did shave, just sort of around the outside area, and I got tons of ingrown hairs, and I was completely, uncomfortable, and I said, this isn't happening, and of course his family didn't care, and so I was like, I just left it at that, and he never asked again, so I was shot in the head.
Good man.
I told him he was going to have to help me, pick the hairs out down there, and he didn't seem to like that idea very much, so. But,
well, I think this raises an interesting question, why we are even caring about pubic hairs. And I think a lot of it has to do with the porn industry and its proliferation, and that all of these images, there's so much more of society is getting exposed to extremism that things that we never even thought would be a social matter before are now suddenly big, important issues. So our whole dialogue as a society is changing, that we even care about stuff like this.
Yeah.
Well, I know when my mother was younger and my age, you wouldn't even mention pubic hair. That was not a thing that you talked about. You didn't say those words if you were a woman.
But are you wearing a thong, or what kind of a bathing suit were you wearing?
It was just a normal, bikini style, tied at the sides, bottom. It wasn't high-rise or anything like that, and I was sitting mostly the entire time, so I don't even think they could have seen my pubic hair, but when I went home and took it off, he was completely shocked.
Do you shave your armpits?
I do shave my armpit. I'm not quite that brave, but I have gone 3 weeks without a bra. And
That's right. You just started the bra-free 3 weeks ago, so tell us how that's going for you.
Well, I work at a city, which is normally what people would think of as a, very conservative job and just
wearing suits
and
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, to me, I just started there a month ago. So for me to start this at the same time that I was starting that, I was a bit kind of worried, and so, I'd wear loose-fitting shirts or blazers or jackets over what I was wearing, so, people wouldn't even be able to see if I was wearing a bra or not. And as this kind of went on, I kind of got sick of that, and it's hot, and I stopped caring, so I just started wearing normal, nice shirts, like blouses, and no one said anything to me, no one stared. It's been sadly uneventful, and I think I care more about how I look than the other people care how I look.
Mm. So nobody's looking, right?
No, I don't have big boobs really either, so there's really not much to look at, but...
The fear was really in your own head, wasn't it? I mean, there was nothing to be afraid of.
It is, and what kind of brought it home to me is probably a week or so ago, kind of in the middle of all of this, I went out to dinner with my husband and his friend, and we went to go see movies and things like that, and, when my husband kind of got me alone, he sort of grabbed at me and he said, shockingly, "You're not wearing a bra?" And I go, "I haven't been wearing one." And he hadn't even noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's funny.
If I live with him and he doesn't notice, I really doubt that little old lady who's clicking her tongue at me is going to notice.
Now, Lisa, have you started your period since you've done the bra-free thing?
I did, and I was very excited to find out. I do take birth control, which is a chemical man-made drug and whatever. But
yeah, I'll get you after the show.
18 years of children. So, but previously when I had been wearing a bra, and I had actually had to see a doctor for this, and she told me to stop wearing a bra, and I didn't listen to her, but I had, my nipples were really, really sore right around my period, and they'd actually start to, if you grabbed them, this, fluid would come out, and I was really shocked. And I went to the doctor, I was like, "What's wrong with me?" And she goes, "Well, it looks like you're starting to lactate. Maybe you need to wear a looser shirt." I go, No, that's for pregnant people, I don't know. And so I didn't listen to her, and when I stopped wearing the bra, the problem went away.
Well, thank you so much for calling in to share with us. I'm so sorry. It is our time to go. So thank you, Lisa. And Sydney, thank you. This was really
it's my
fun.
pleasure.
I'm so looking forward to doing this with you once a month here now. I don't know, 20 seconds before we get cut off. Anything you'd like to share?
Just, I had a great time, and I hope the people that listen to this show learn something and something to think about.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, Sydney Ross Singer, killerculture.com is the website. The book is Dress to Kill.